My name is Rebecca Thompson, and as I drove toward my childhood home in Denver, my palms were sweating. At 35, after 7 years away, I was returning with Lieutenant Colonel insignia hidden in my bag. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments and hit that like button. Trust me, if you've ever been underestimated by family, this story will show you exactly how sweet vindication can taste. The moment I sat down at that dining table, the dismissal began. My parents were celebrating my brother Mark's promotion to senior vice president while ignoring my 12 years of Army service. Mark understands real business, my mother said. Rebecca's just been wandering around military bases following orders like a child. Mark smirked. Face it, Becca, you'll never amount to anything in the military. Little did they know that tomorrow, at Dad's most crucial defense contract meeting, everything would change. Because the Pentagon Liaison with final authority over his company's $340 million contract, she'd be calling me ma'am. Growing up in Denver, I always felt like I was living in my brother's shadow. My father, David, works as Regional Operations Director for Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions, a defense contractor providing logistics support to military installations. My mother, Carol, is a school administrator who prides herself on practical thinking and traditional career paths. Mark, who's 37 now, was always the golden child. Business degree from University of Colorado, corporate fast track, married his college girlfriend Lisa, bought a beautiful house in Cherry Hills by 30. Everything came easy because he followed the exact path our parents understood and approved of. I chose differently. I took an ROTC scholarship because something about military service called to me. The structure, the purpose, the chance to serve something bigger than myself. My parents saw it as rebellion against their carefully planned vision for my life. For 12 years, they treated my military career like an extended phase I'd eventually outgrow. When I got commissioned as second lieutenant, only my grandmother came to the ceremony. Mom and Dad had a prior commitment at Mark's company picnic. When I made captain after leading a successful logistics operation in Afghanistan, the family dinner conversation lasted exactly 3 minutes before shifting to Mark's promotion to regional manager. Every family gathering followed the same painful pattern. Mark would share his latest business achievements, team expansions, bonus structures, investment portfolios. The family hung on every word, asking detailed questions and offering enthusiastic congratulations. When my turn came, I'd mention completing advanced training or receiving military commendations, and they'd nod politely before someone inevitably steered the conversation back to Mark's real-world success. My mother worried constantly about my single status at 35. Mark has Lisa and the kids, she'd say with that familiar tone of disappointment. He's building something permanent. When are you going to stop moving around and settle down like a normal person? She couldn't understand that my career wasn't about avoiding commitment, it was about committing to something meaningful. The extended family wasn't much better. At reunions, Mark was introduced as our successful son who runs an entire department. I was simply Rebecca, who's still in the Army. That word still always cut deep, like I was stuck while everyone else moved forward. What hurt most was their complete lack of curiosity about what I actually did. They assumed military service meant following basic orders and marching in formation. They had no idea I'd specialized in strategic logistics, earned advanced degrees in operations management, or been selected for increasingly complex assignments requiring independent thinking and leadership skills. The truth was, I'd just been promoted to lieutenant colonel and appointed Pentagon Liaison for the Future Combat Systems Program, one of the most critical defense contracts in the country. I was responsible for overseeing billions in defense spending and had authority to evaluate contractor performance across the entire program. The biggest irony? Titan Industries, the parent company of Dad's Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions, was directly under my oversight. I had the power to recommend contract renewals or terminations affecting hundreds of jobs, including my father's. But I'd kept this promotion quiet, just like all the others. Years of family indifference had taught me to stop seeking their validation. Whether they understood had become irrelevant to my sense of purpose. Still, driving home after 7 years away, I hoped maybe this time would be different. That hope died 5 minutes into dinner. The family dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but it quickly became a painful reminder of exactly why I'd stayed away for so long. Dad had called this gathering because he had major news that could change everything. Titan Industries CEO, Colonel James Morrison, retired, was flying in from Washington, D.C. to personally evaluate Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions. This wasn't just another routine contract review, it was make or break time. Dad's entire career and the jobs of over 200 employees hung in the balance. This is the opportunity I've been working toward for 15 years, Dad explained as Mom brought out her good china for the special occasion. If we can impress Colonel Morrison and show him what Rocky Mountain is truly capable of, we could become Titan's primary logistics partner for the entire Western region. We're talking about a contract worth hundreds of millions over the next 5 years. But if we don't, he didn't need to finish that sentence. Everyone understood the stakes. Mark immediately jumped into problem-solving mode, which was typical for him in family situations. Dad, you need someone who understands both military requirements and corporate strategy. I've been studying defense contracts in my MBA program. I could help you prepare talking points about efficiency metrics and cost optimization strategies that would really impress him. Mom practically beamed at him with obvious pride. That's so thoughtful of you, Mark. You always know exactly how to help when it matters most. Lisa, Mark's wife, looked around the table thoughtfully and asked, "What about Rebecca? She's military, right? Shouldn't she understand what this Colonel Morrison would want to hear from a contractor?" The table fell completely silent for a moment, like someone had asked an inappropriate question at a formal dinner. Then Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, Rebecca knows about following orders and basic military procedures, but this meeting is about high-level strategic thinking and sophisticated business operations. Colonel Morrison built Titan Industries from a small contractor into a defense industry giant. He needs to see proven results and sophisticated strategic vision, not just field-level experience." Rebecca's Army background is nice, Mark added with the kind of condescending tone that made my stomach clench. But this is really about understanding the business side of defense contracting. Dad needs someone who can speak Colonel Morrison's language about profit margins, operational efficiency, and strategic growth potential. I felt that familiar sting of dismissal wash over me, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. "What specific kind of contract are you hoping to secure?" "Logistics support for the Future Combat Systems program," Dad said, his chest literally puffing up with pride. "It's one of the Pentagon's biggest and most important initiatives. We're talking about a 5-year contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars." My heart nearly stopped beating. The Future Combat Systems program was exactly what I oversaw as Pentagon Liaison. I knew every single detail of that contract, every performance metric, every evaluation criterion. I had literally written the assessment standards that Dad's company would be judged against. "That sounds incredibly important," I managed to say, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Important doesn't even begin to cover it," Dad replied enthusiastically. "This contract could set our entire family up for life. Mark's already talking about how he could expand his business development team to help Rocky Mountain compete more effectively in the defense sector if we get selected." Mark nodded with obvious excitement. "I could transition some of my corporate strategy experience to help Rocky Mountain position themselves better for future military contracts. It's all about understanding what military leaders really value and how to demonstrate that value clearly." The irony was almost too overwhelming to process. Here was my family, completely unaware that I was literally one of those military leaders who determined what contractors like Dad's company needed to succeed and what would cause them to fail. "So, what's your strategy for impressing Colonel Morrison?" I asked, genuinely curious despite the painful family dynamics. "We're going to show him our efficiency improvements and cost reduction initiatives over the past 2 years," Dad explained with obvious confidence. "Mark's been helping me put together a comprehensive presentation about streamlining operations and maximizing value for military customers. The key is speaking his language," Mark added with complete confidence. "Military guys respect hard data and clear results. No fluff or fancy presentations, just concrete evidence of performance and efficiency." Mom turned to me with that patronizing smile I remembered from childhood. "Maybe you could help with something simple, Rebecca. Do you know anything about military uniforms or proper protocols? You could make sure your father looks appropriately respectful when he meets Colonel Morrison." The suggestion hit me like a physical slap. After 12 years of dedicated military service, including multiple combat deployments and specialized advanced training, my own mother thought my expertise extended to uniform etiquette and basic courtesy protocols. "I'm sure Rebecca knows all about saluting and standing at attention," Mark said with a slight chuckle that made my jaw clench. "But what Dad really needs is someone who understands the fundamental business principles that drive military contracting decisions." Lisa, perhaps sensing the growing tension at the table, tried to include me in the conversation. "Rebecca, you must have some insight into how military people think and make decisions, right?" Before I could answer, Dad waved his hand dismissively. "This isn't really about military thinking, though. Colonel Morrison may have been in the military once, but now he's a successful CEO running a multi-million-dollar corporation. He's looking at bottom line, strategic value propositions, and long-term growth potential. Rebecca's experience is more about following established procedures and completing assigned missions." "Exactly right," Mark agreed enthusiastically. "It's the fundamental difference between being a soldier and being a leader. Dad needs to demonstrate executive-level leadership thinking, not just tactical knowledge or operational experience." Those words cut deeper than anything else they had said, because they revealed just how completely my family misunderstood not only my actual role and responsibilities, but the entire nature of military leadership and strategic planning. As the evening continued, the conversation kept returning obsessively to tomorrow's crucial meeting. Mark offered detailed advice about presentation techniques and business terminology. Mom suggested elaborate menu options for the catered lunch. Lisa recommended professional photographers to document what could be a historic partnership announcement. Not once did anyone ask for my input again. I sat there in surreal silence, listening to my family meticulously plan for a meeting where I would literally be the primary person evaluating their performance, and they had absolutely no idea. The irony was so profound it felt almost dreamlike, but I stayed completely silent about my role. Partly because years of family dismissal had taught me to stop trying to prove myself to people who had already decided I had nothing valuable to offer. And partly because mixing family relationships with professional responsibilities could compromise both my integrity and Dad's legitimate chances for success. Tomorrow would change absolutely everything. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I arrived at Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions headquarters 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting. I wore my dress blue military uniform, every ribbon and insignia placed with absolute precision according to regulations. The security guard at the front desk immediately straightened to attention when he noticed my rank. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel," he said with obvious respect. "You're here for the Titan Industries evaluation meeting?" "Yes, I'm the Pentagon Liaison," I replied professionally, showing my military identification and security clearance documentation. His eyes widened noticeably as he processed my credentials. "Yes, ma'am. Conference Room A on the third floor." When the elevator doors opened, I found myself face to face with Mark, who was reviewing presentation notes on his tablet. He looked up casually, then did a complete double take. Rebecca? What are you doing here? And why are you wearing dress uniform? I'm here for the meeting, I said simply. What meeting? His confusion was genuine. You mean Dad's presentation to Colonel Morrison? Before I could respond, Dad appeared around the corner with two other Rocky Mountain executives. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me, his expression shifting rapidly from surprise to confusion to panic. Rebecca, what's going on here? Why are you at my workplace in uniform? Please tell me you're not planning some kind of family intervention. Dad, I'm here for work. A senior executive approached with a welcoming smile. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, I'm Robert Hayes, VP of Operations. We're truly honored to have you here for the comprehensive assessment. Dad's face went completely pale. Pentagon Liaison? Yes, sir, I replied in my official military tone. I'm here to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions' performance capabilities and readiness for the Future Combat Systems Logistics contract. You're the Pentagon Liaison, Mark said slowly, as if testing the words. You're the military representative who decides whether Dad's company gets the contract. That's correct. Colonel Morrison chose that exact moment to arrive with his executive team. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, he greeted me with genuine warmth and obvious respect. Excellent to finally meet you in person. Your preliminary performance assessments have been absolutely outstanding. He turned to the Rocky Mountain executives. Gentlemen, you should consider yourselves extremely fortunate to have Lieutenant Colonel Thompson overseeing this critical program. Her strategic insights have revolutionized contractor evaluation. I took my designated position at the head of the table. Dad sat rigidly, still processing. Mark looked like he was solving an impossible equation. Good morning, everyone, I began in my authoritative military voice. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Thompson, Pentagon Liaison for the Future Combat Systems program. I'll be conducting a comprehensive evaluation of Rocky Mountain's capabilities. Colonel Morrison added, Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's assessment carries final authority for contract decisions. The room fell into absolute silence. In that profound moment, the power dynamic that had defined my entire relationship with my family shifted completely and irreversibly. For the first time in my life, I was the one with authority they desperately needed to respect. The comprehensive assessment took exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. I evaluated every aspect of Rocky Mountain's operations with the same professional thoroughness I brought to every contractor review. Dad's presentation was genuinely solid. His 15 years of experience showed clearly in the detailed logistics plans and efficiency metrics. Mark's business analysis, while somewhat basic, demonstrated real effort to understand military requirements. When I announced that Rocky Mountain Defense Solutions had earned full approval for a 3-year contract worth $340 million annually, the room erupted in relieved applause and celebration. But I noticed Dad didn't join the celebration. He just sat there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. After Colonel Morrison and his team departed with warm congratulations, the conference room slowly emptied until only family remained. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. So, Mark finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're a lieutenant colonel. Yes. And you've been overseeing Dad's contract this whole time. Among many others, yes. Dad stood up slowly, like he'd aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. Rebecca, I need to understand something crucial. How long have you actually held this position? I was promoted 6 months ago. 6 months. He repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. And last night, when we were all talking about strategies for impressing Colonel Morrison, you knew. I knew everything, Dad. I wrote the evaluation criteria your company was assessed against today. I personally designed the performance metrics Mark helped you prepare for. I've been overseeing this entire program since my promotion. Mark ran both hands through his hair in obvious distress. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say anything? When exactly would I have told you? I asked calmly. When you were confidently explaining that military people don't understand business strategy? When you suggested I could help with uniform protocols? When you told me I'd never amount to anything in the military? The words hung heavily in the air. Mark had the decency to look genuinely ashamed. We didn't know, Dad said weakly. You never asked, I replied without anger. In 12 years of military service, you never once asked about my actual responsibilities, my career progression, or what I'd accomplished. Mom chose that moment to burst through the conference room doors, having driven over immediately when Dad called her with the shocking news. Is it true? Are you really the Pentagon person who just approved David's contract? Pentagon Liaison, I corrected professionally. And yes, she collapsed into the nearest chair. We had no idea you were important. I was always important, Mom. My work has always mattered. You just never thought it was worth understanding. 3 weeks later, I found myself back at the family dinner table, but absolutely everything had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The conversation flowed completely differently now. Mark asked thoughtful, detailed questions about military logistics strategy and genuinely listened to my answers. Mom inquired about my deployment experiences and leadership challenges with authentic interest. Dad proudly showed me the framed letter from Colonel Morrison commending Rocky Mountain's successful contract implementation. I've been reading extensively about military career progression, Mom said as she passed the potatoes. I had absolutely no idea how competitive promotions are at your level, especially to lieutenant colonel rank. It's entirely merit-based, I explained. Comprehensive performance evaluations, leadership assessments, strategic thinking capabilities, and operational results. Like corporate advancement, Mark said thoughtfully, but with national security implications and life or death consequences. Exactly. Dad set down his fork and looked at me seriously. Rebecca, I need to say something important. I spent 15 years working in defense contracting, and I never truly understood what military officers actually do day to day. I thought you followed orders and completed assignments. I had no idea you were making strategic decisions that affect entire programs worth billions of dollars. Most civilians don't understand military career paths, I said. The ranks, responsibilities, and decision-making authority aren't intuitive if you haven't lived in that world. But we should have asked, Mom interjected with obvious regret. We should have been genuinely curious about your life and work instead of assuming we understood what your service meant. The healing process wasn't instant or complete. Years of fundamental misunderstanding couldn't be erased through a few honest conversations. But something essential had shifted permanently. My family was finally seeing me clearly, and more importantly, they were making sustained effort to understand, rather than dismiss. Mark had started consulting with me regularly on defense industry trends for his own business expansion. I realize now that I was competing with someone playing an entirely different game at a completely different level. He told me privately one evening. You weren't avoiding real responsibility. You were taking on responsibilities I couldn't even begin to comprehend. My parents began asking about my work with genuine curiosity and respect. They wanted to understand the strategic challenges I faced daily, the decisions I made that affected national security, the impact and scope of my responsibilities. I'm proud of you, Dad told me one evening. I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm deeply sorry it took such dramatic circumstances for me to finally see it clearly. I never needed you to be proud, I replied honestly, but I'm grateful you finally understand why this work matters so much to me. Looking back on that transformative dinner and everything that followed, I've learned that family relationships can evolve and heal, but only when all parties choose genuine growth over stubborn pride, curiosity over defensive assumptions. My story certainly isn't unique. Countless women choose careers that their families don't immediately understand or value: military service, academic research, social work, entrepreneurship, creative pursuits, public service. We often face the difficult choice between desperately seeking family approval and courageously following our authentic calling. The healthiest choice is almost always the latter. What I've come to understand is that validation from others, even beloved family members, can never substitute for internal conviction about your chosen path. I served my country with dedication and excellence for 12 years before my family finally understood what that service meant. Their eventual recognition felt wonderful, but it was never necessary for my sense of purpose or self-worth. The military taught me that some things are worth doing regardless of external appreciation or understanding. Protecting national security, serving something infinitely greater than yourself, developing expertise that saves lives and preserves freedom. These have inherent value that doesn't depend on family comprehension or approval. But families can change when presented with undeniable evidence of what they've missed or misunderstood. My parents and brother weren't malicious in their dismissal. They were simply limited by their own experiences, assumptions, and narrow definitions of success. For women facing similar family dynamics, I've learned that the most powerful response isn't anger, resentment, or dramatic confrontation. It's sustained excellence. Do your work so well that it speaks for itself. Build something so meaningful and impactful that its value becomes absolutely undeniable. I didn't need Dad's boss to call me ma'am to know my worth or validate my choices. But I'm deeply grateful it helped my family understand that some careers are profound callings. Some choices require sacrifices others can't comprehend, and some paths lead to destinations they never imagined possible. Your family's ability to see your value doesn't determine that value. Your worth isn't contingent on their understanding or approval. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their path is valid. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Your journey matters, whether others understand it or not.